All right, welcome back to Light Body Evolution. Today we are looking at the fire from within. And the fire from within is a result of organizing charge, collapsing charge, and manifesting and creating the reality from within yourself. There's a couple ways we can look at this today, but as continuing with our study of the ones and zeros, there was an observation that was made this week that I think we've talked about before, but I want to go deeper into it because the confusion of good and bad, the confusion of positive and negative, and the confusion of charge. So, a little backstory of charge itself. Of course, here we look at charge as negative when we protect and defend the self, and then positive when we deplete the self in some way. So this in the patterns of ones and zeros that makes up the 12 code, the 12 all the code 1 through 16. The binary code, for example, the root is all ones, the sacral is all zeros, and so on and so forth. And we can get into that, but the one itself, okay, is positive and negative. Okay? The zero does not have polarity. And this is, I think, is where we can really step into a deeper awareness that when we charge the one or the zero, okay, instead of pulsing, right? That's what we're here to do. Pulse to receive and share and pulse our energy instead of invest in the expectation of return, which then attracts charge. And now we must protect the self, defend the self, or deplete the self to feel important, to feel okay inside. So the one itself, when it charges, it distorts the zero. And I like this word distortion because it's been used a lot lately, hasn't it? The masculine distortion, the feminine distortion, right? All of the distortion. So let's talk about what's being distorted. And gravity is being distorted. Okay? And that's what we're really talking about here. And, are we talking about the gravity of the weight of things and the heaviness of things? Yes, the vibrational gravity, when it becomes disorganized, as we know, creates a wobble. And this wobble distorts the zero. It distorts the awareness beyond the polar charge. So I want to make it really clear that in this space here, the polar charge, the charge that we're talking about, positive and negative, the protection and the defense of self or the depletion of self, becomes the reality of self in that wobble. Now, the zero itself, when it is aligned, of course, it's aligned in a spiral. And the 0 point itself is that one frequency that's been removed to not allow the alignment of that spiral, that rainbow flames, to really align. So once the alignment occurs and you collapse the charge, your stillness and your silence is the result. And what are you actually experiencing here? You are experiencing the zero. And then the alignment or proper distribution, long waves within short waves, fractalization of the self. And this is where you become the co-creator of the self and also can command the dreaming body. This is where we awaken into the dream of self and the awareness of self that comes along with it. Or we are still working through the charge of self. So everybody is distorting the zero. And how does it happen? For example, if I seek to do something to create a result that never gets created, that is always out of my reach, How am I distorting the zero? How am I distorting the awareness of receiving? And I think that's the biggest distortion of the zero, is to distort our ability to be aware of what it is to be receptive. Imagine if the charge distorted your ability to breathe. We'd learn it a lot quicker. And so when you're in the charge, you stop breathing. Imagine if that happened and you're gasping for air all the time because the inner charge is distorting the awareness of yourself. And so in the self, what we're talking about is the receiving and the sharing of self, the pulsing of self, the fractal alignment of creating the own gravity of self. And once that alignment happens, right below the 0 point here in your belly button, there's a point that the Taoists call the Dantian. Okay, and it's about an inch below the belly button. This is where the fire from within awakens. And the fire from within is your plasmatic and your ability to process and literally interact with plasma. Now, plasma...
Can you say that one more time?
I can try. So yes, the awaken of the fire from within is the infinity codexes. Now, once that awakens the fire from within, the also 7 principles of stalking also arise. And I want to tie the 7 principles of stalking with the 7 points or the 7 infinity codexes that fit into your physical body.
What did you say about the plasma thing?
Yes, the infinity codexes are plasma. Okay? They are the plasma intelligence, because when energy goes into the black hole, there is also energy that escapes. And it is highly plasmatic energy. It's highly organized. So plasma is a way of organizing things. Light is a way of organizing things. Sound is a way of organization. Everything in this universe adheres to the organization of gravity. Everything in this dimension, at least. And when I say gravity, I want to really be clear. We're really talking about our vibrational reality. Because when you start thinking about how do I really experience gravity, and then think about your feelings and think about your client's feelings. And notice they can be in a situation that is really not real. It may have been real at one time, but emotionally they're in the situation and they're sitting in your office, and they might as well be in the situation right then and there, because the charge is present and distorting the 0. And when it's distorted, it really can't align properly because there's one frequency. That's why when we find that 0 point and it actually collapses and your stillness comes forward, how do we explain that? How do we explain that experience? And notice that it's always felt, isn't it? That's the whole thing. So the awareness of your stillness and your silence is the 0 itself. And that's why silence is the only energy that will meet the story. And as long as the dialogue is charging the situation, taking up space in your perception, taking up space in your relation, taking up space in your value, taking up space in your connection. So charge distorts those 4 main areas, where those 3 and 4 major 0 points really collapse charge. And notice when you have the big emotional release, it was really heavy down here, wasn't it? And then when you have the heartache experience, it's really fucking intense, right? And then when you were trying to work out the outcome to everything and really stressed your system out, it was really up here in the shoulders and all of this energy. So we do have this physical vessel that is aligned for harmonic resonance, the 5-pointed star. This is our body's natural harmonic alignment, and it's very obvious that when it gets out of that alignment, we have pain and we are out of alignment with the natural alignment of our physical structure. Our emotional structure is a six-pointed star. That's why we must integrate our feelings for them to be functional. Alrighty, welcome back to another edition of Light Body Evolution. Welcome everybody. Today I want to paint the big picture of what we're working with. I want to dive into the charge of our reality, the development of awareness, and what it's really all about. And also, I'm going to bring it up right now because it came up earlier. It's commerce versus community. And that can have many, many things. And so this morning, that came forward that I want to begin to talk about and get into the changing of how we perceive community versus the commerce of life. And we're all conditioned in a capitalistic society, and all of that investment and expectation of return, which really ties into the giving and receiving business. So in the process of healing, and when your clients are coming to you for the holding of space and the development of self, the story of life is where we always begin. And for our purposes here, the 144 stories with multiple verses and kind of inversions of how those stories happen is exactly how the ancient and modern people in West Africa, how the shamans divine this code that shows and brings forth this story. So we are using this same process, and we call it the patterns of ones and zeros, which we then later turned into computer language, and we have computers based on that same language now because it is a language of the universe. And the language of the universe and the story that we live in and the dialogue. So all of us, of course, have a dialogue that must be faced and to transmute energy, or we live as the dialogue. And so the story of our lives, the story and the history of who we are is played out through those things. And one of the quotes that I came across today, and it's a long one here, and it says that we talk to ourselves incessantly about our world. In fact, we maintain our world within our internal talk. And whenever we finish talking to ourselves about ourselves and about the world always is always as it should be. We renew it. We rekindle it with life. We uphold it with our internal talk. Not only that, but we also choose our paths as we talk to ourselves. Thus we repeat the same choices over and over until the day we die, because we keep on repeating the same internal talk over and over until the day we die. The warrior is aware of this and strives to stop his or her internal talk. And I don't like the word stop in it. To me, I want to use the word transmute. So I want to transmute the inner dialogue. And I think Sherry's story this morning about around the 10-year-old girls that have to go through the validation and are coming into that part of their life where they're looking to each other for their self-confidence and identity is such a crucial role of how the dialogue creates the world as you perceive it. And yet the world is exactly as it is. Notice that our perception of it opens up things, and it also can close down things. And so in the story of our lives, and what am I really talking about here? I'm talking about the validation of worth outside of ourselves, the validation of value outside of ourselves, second code. Third code, the mental validation of having to be right, having to create realities in the world to then feel safe, whether those things are connected with reality or not. Notice it does not matter that the dialogue can consume and control every aspect of your life, even so that it becomes comforting even though you hate it, And it is that thing that always appears to betray you. And the more we become aware of the story, the more we have the opportunity to build awareness. And so, in our world, what are the things that are completely untrue that the dialogue tells us? And this is kind of the big picture today, that us knowing what the dialogue is going to do, okay? And I kind of simplified that in my mind earlier. I don't know if that was in my mind really, but that's the word that comes out earlier this morning. And it was kind of like, okay, well, here's a couple things that the world promises us but never delivers. And fulfillment was the biggest thing that came forward. And the way that our emotional bodies organize, it makes the embodiment of fulfillment this interesting process. Because what is the awareness of embodiment? What's the opposite of embodiment is detachment. The detachment of self and the embodiment of self is this big story that we're really working in and how we are organizing the development and self-awareness itself. So we are coming forward in the story and recognizing the story and singling out the parts of the story that is a lie, the parts of the story that seek to validate. And what are those parts? Okay, they're the emotional parts that get charged, and let's talk about that extensively right now, because now I'm in this story of seeking something outside of myself that my dialogue told me that if I just keep doing this, that eventually it's going to happen, or it's going to validate me in some way. And even when it does not validate me, notice how convincing the dialogue is for us to continue the inner story. And that's what the quote kind of said, didn't it? That story that continues. And so I think we're all here to develop the silence to meet the dialogue. Because I will tell you, in this quote, it's in the front part of this book, which comes from his first books. And the last books get into the silence. So a lot of the first quotes are setting up certain things for his later teachings. And I don't know if he understood that when he was happening or after it happened, and he wrote the books in the succession that he did, because one of the last books was about the power of silence. And the dialogue has to be explored so much. It must be literally looked at. It must be discovered in all of the ways that it seeks to validate. And this is why it's such a personal experience. This is why our story is a personal experience, and the story wants you to personalize your experience. And in the personalization of that experience, we're coming down into now the magnetic organization of our vibrational or our feeling reality. So how we feel now in the 9 points of assemblage are where the charges attach. And so in the first code, the attachment is rejection and resistance. And I can either resist that energy or be depleted by it. And notice that if I resist anything, okay, I attract that same resistance. And like attracts like in this whole realm. And this is where the dialogue does not literally want you to understand that how you feel actually creates and attracts your reality. So the inner dialogue, also the story that you tell yourself, also is the thing that attracts your whole reality. So for example, I want to use Ashley's thing about taking on someone else's pain. Think of the story that gets created, that I should take your suffering on because you don't deserve to suffer. Okay? And it sounds, in our regular world, that sounds normal, doesn't it? But in the soul world, it is a sheer violation of why we came here. And notice the story that tells us, well, I can process things better. I can handle this. So I'm going to handle this for them. And I will guarantee every one of you that you've never really processed anybody else's energy. And when you tried, it was a fucking shit show. And it literally made more problems than anything else. And I can attest to that as physically doing it for multiple years in this body. and literally living like a live wire, really, like everything and everybody's things was my fucking responsibility. I can totally relate to that. And my dialogue wants to keep telling me that story too, by the way. It loves to keep telling me that story. So the negative charge is when I seek to protect and defend something, which takes a lot of energy. And when your clients come and they have a negative charge, at the end of the day, they crash. Okay, that's how you know you're protecting yourself, because it takes a tremendous amount of energy to do so. And if your client crashes at the end of the day, you're like, negative charge. This is it. Okay. The positive charge is quite interesting, though, because, we're familiar with neediness, aren't we? Anybody like that feeling when somebody comes with that neediness, okay? And it's like they can't get enough energy and they're like pulling at you on so many levels, and you're like, holy shit, if they don't stop sucking at my energy like a black hole in a way, I don't know what I'm going to do. And this is the positive charge of being depleted and not being able to get enough energy. And I call it a positive charge syndrome, where everybody's pushing out for and grabbing at everybody. And we've all had clients like this, right? And some of you, I'm sure, have had the extreme client where decided that they were going to throw a tantrum because of it. Oh, it's a hell of an experience. It's my favorite. It's my favorite experience because literally they want to suck anything dry of energy, and they become vampiric in that energy because they don't have any energy of their own, or their dialogue perceives that they have no energy of their own. So we've come into the charge of the story, right? And then aligning the 0 point is discovering two basic things. What do we really care about in the situation, which aligns our magnetics of our heart? And what do we truly want to receive? And so the story and the charge always pushes away those two realities. And when you can hold that awareness, like Sherry was talking about with the 10-year-old girls, which is a lot of energy, by the way, okay? It's a lot of energy. They are hardcore. And, I've heard a lot of stories. They're doing the light as a feather, stiff as a board, and levitating each other, big extremes of energy, They're laughing and giggling, and now somebody's crying and upset because they're excluded. And you're seeing these extremes happen. And emotionally, it's hard to stay in your center in the space of charge. That takes practice. So the big story of the alignment of gravity of the self, the alignment of the gravity of what you truly care about, and what you're receiving in the situation is the remedy in a lot of ways as the practitioner of holding this space of remembering for your client that when they're in this charge and story, they're not receiving. Or it may not be that they're shut down from receiving, but they are limited, real limited. It's like when your pipes get corroded at the house, or the arteries get blocked, and the blood, it's not really flowing. So our world and the world that we create in the dialogue, this is something I am really interested in. And that story that we created leading up to when we were 21 and developed the identity for this vessel is that story that will try to continually to play out. And it is the story that will constantly try to appear and create false evidence of it in your reality. And it's kind of like, what is the handbook to live vibrationally? Okay, so the first part of my handbook to live vibrationally, and if you got a piece of paper, write it down. What do I care about? And what do I want to receive in this situation? What am I receiving in this situation? And that's a better question. So mark out, what do I want to receive? What am I receiving in this situation? And notice how simple that sounds and how difficult it is to be aware and have that awareness in real time. So We're here to transmute charge, to become aware of the charge, to accept it, to understand it, to develop trust in the self, in the magnetism of care as the foundation of happiness and joy, and true fulfillment in this moment, and then the bliss of living from no pity. All right, welcome back to another edition of Light Body Evolution. Today we are calling forward our awareness of what is commonly referred to as 3, 6, and 9. And I want to bring you at this time into the assemblage point system. I want to bring you into the visualization of how charge disorganizes information in your field through the emotional charge. So let's be really clear that when we're looking at our numbers 1 through 9, 3, 6, and 9, okay, and we are talking about a 9-pointed star. And so from this perspective, as we open up into today's reality here, and we open up this container of the organization field of 369, okay? I want to show you how this works and how collapsing charge arranges a very interesting geometric pattern that is literally the pattern of organization in the whole universe. So for example, big picture, dodecahedron, isosahedron. Dodecahedron is your field, just as it is the field of the universe itself. And within that, the isosahedron, which is a isosceles pyramid pointed up and an isosceles pyramid pointed down. Okay, it looks like an elongated diamond pattern. All right. Now, if you're following along as I go through and you want to look up what a 9-pointed star looks like, pull it up on your picks. And I want to show you something that changes in the 9 points of assemblage. And first of all, let's go through the first 6, which is that 6-pointed star organization, which helps us integrate things. And we've established here, I'm pretty sure, that when our feelings are not integrated, we may live in pity or the pain body. When our feelings are charged, in that story, in that experience, in that now moment that we are still charging the situation, we are disorganized through the charge field, okay, and unintegrated in our feelings. And what do I mean by unintegrated? Less than aware. Charge is the absence of awareness. Notice awareness shapes gravity. Okay, and it's hard to have this conversation because we have to have this conversation through the awareness of how we shape our own gravity through the emotional field that either tilts the magnetic field, the isosceles pyramid pointed up, the isosceles pyramid pointed down, that tilts the magnetic field to one brain or the other, or off its vertical awareness, its vertical access, when everything becomes even and fractalized. And this is what we're always talking about, that organization is the fractalization of things. And this 369 thing, third assemblage point. The third assemblage point is the point that misorganizes the field the most. And my phrase, concern is the abandonment of self, is the antithesis of using control in the place of trust that mislines the magnetic field on every level. And the Toltecs talk about the third point of assemblage, the point of other worlds, meaning that without trust, you do not live in the heart, you do not live magnetically, you live in the tilt. And in any story that we are disorganizing the emotional information, which is most all of them, by the way, you guys, we're always disorganizing information. People are trying to share their disorganized information with us. Okay. They're trying to create control. And that's why we call it the fucking petty tyrant and all this other bullshit. Okay. When they come at us with the tilted charge field. And what are they saying? Validate my charge. Okay, so 3 right here, the first 3 assemblage points aligns the integration of the masculine energy. And what do I mean by that? I mean by the unconscious programming to be an appreciation of self through rejection, to be in understanding of self through judgment, to be in trust of self through trying to control the fucking outcome to every fucking thing in our life up until that point. Okay. So this is 3. Okay. And think of it 3. Now we're going to go to 6. Okay. 6 is the point of no fucking pity, pain and pleasure, victimhood and entitlement. Anybody notice that the victim program tells us we must control the outcome of things to avoid it. And now the alternative of being entitled now to defend the victim now becomes a functional disorganization of the pattern of 6. And now we're bringing the feminine into it. We're bringing everything that's based on fear that must be faced to embody love. We are bringing all of the abandonment forward that must be faced to embody joy. And now we're bringing the pain body, the victimhood, entitlement, and defensiveness together to embody humility and live from no pity. So 3 and 6. Now, this is where it gets interesting, you guys, because before I go there, I want to show you that when 6, 1 through 6, okay, is organized, it makes a 6-pointed star. And I've told you many times that your pain body and the flower of life, because those circles that make those angles are literally awareness fields. And if it's not aware, it's not tilted properly. And we'll see this in astrology charts. You'll see it's not perfect geometry. There'll be things that are off a little bit, okay? So you'll see this in the planetary organizations also. So this is how things are disorganized and become organized in the universe through the dodecahedron, the full code, and the alignment of what we're about to get to, this isosceles reality. Okay. And to preface that, the isosceles pattern is known as the finger of God. It is the energy that creates or destroys. And I want to bring the 9 number, which is the liberation from the fucking story, through the integration on a soul level and the co-creation of realizing that you are not the story, 7 through 9 in your assemblage point systems. Okay, so trust, bliss, and liberation, 3, 6, and 9. Now, this isosceles pointed up is very interesting and down, because what is it really pulling into the awareness of our ability to co-create this reality fully? Whether it is our connection to the material world and the one pointed down into the earth that is grounding us into the magnetics of this planet, or the one that is pointed into heavens, grounding us into the magnetics of our source connection. And so notice there are layers within layers within layers and within layers, but all of the layers mimic one another. Our field and the universe's field are the same. So this allows us to look now at the 9-pointed star and realize that the finger of God, to create or destroy. And notice that when you destroy through charge, you didn't realize you were destroying the self. But through the destruction of self is how we embody the organization of self and the manifestation of creation through literally this existence. So this organization in the field is what's happening when you collapse charge. When you align the field up properly and the 369 comes online and your masculine energy is straight the fuck up, and you literally can face rejection, resistance, and have an awareness field of accepting and appreciating the self. When you have the awareness field now of judging the self and understanding forgiveness and understanding in the full package of the awareness of the self and the understanding of self and the understanding of others, of course. And now we have the control of self, the manipulation of self, okay, the projection of, oh shit, this might happen, and we may be betrayed again. And so the trust of self. So in the masculine, when it's set up, and notice this is what you are building in your field with every collapse. You're building the awareness field of what it is to live in the organization of your masculine energy. The Toltecs call this Ometeotl, the tip of the arrow, where masculine and feminine meet. This is very important because this is the organization of how the universe gets aligned with itself. This is how the universe allows creation to work through it instead of it being out of alignment with its destiny. And is charge out of alignment with your destiny? In a way. And in a way, it's also in the path of your destiny and the energy that is being utilized to be organized. And so we have plenty of energy in 3, 6, and 9 to organize to what? The 0 point. So 3, 6, and 9 in the assemblage point system is organizing how we literally make the spiral. Okay. And in music, that 6-pointed star, it sounds like the old dream sequence. It's all whole tone. But this isosceles pyramid, which is also there, by the way, okay, it has this other sound that it's very harmonic. It's very directed in a way. And in our music, we use the chords 1, 4, and 5 a whole lot. And this is what this is: 1, 4, and 5. And if you were sitting down at the music, you would look at C as your root and G as your fifth and F, C, F, and G, and put them all together. And there is this very harmonic sound. And it is basically this isosceles pyramid. And you could do an opposite one that goes down, and you would hear basically what an isosceles pyramid actually sounds like. Okay. So our harmonics and the way that we hear sound even is very, very, very connected to these shapes. So imagine organizing your emotional body through the unconscious programming, first of all, 3, the superconsciousness, 6, and 9 is the overlay of the subtle energy reality that is the vibration of the human energy field, but also the vibration on larger scales out there in the universe, as it is in the micro scales that it is in here. And this is what the warriors, I'm pretty sure, realized. They witnessed how the universe disorganized itself. They witnessed how it became back into its own self-organization. So, yes. So I'm going to open up some energy now, or open up for some questions, because today the focusing of our intent and the development of awareness are the same path. And awareness itself, and when I say awareness, I mean these 6 dualities that either open up to us living in the story 7, okay, being unintegrated on a soul level, and my soul being like, come on, get with the fucking program here. Okay. And feeling unliberated, like the past repeats itself. And I want to tie it all now to the point of no pity, right in your solar plexus. This is the point of suffering also in the 3rd code. But in the back of that code is the code of clarity, and suffering comes through clarity. And I want to show you today how the warriors came to this conclusion. Okay. Because wisdom also shows up in the 3rd code, doesn't it? The solar plexus. And our path of wisdom is derived from the path of suffering. And what is the suffering in our lives of 3, 6, and 9? Okay. The disorganization of masculine energy, rejection of self, judgment of self, control of self, the misalignment of feminine energy, the fear of self, the fear and the abandonment of self, and also the pain of victimhood and entitlement, which is built on the whole 6 codes below. So this is masculine, this is feminine. Today, my intent is to simplify it for you to understand how the organization geometrically is literally what we are doing here by becoming in alignment with literally making this spiral. And this 9-pointed star is this magical thing. And when I looked into it today, when you think of the 6-pointed star, you think of a triangle pointed up and 1 pointed down, right? But look at the 9-pointed star. It turns where the triangle is pointing this way, and then the isosceles is right in the fucking center. This is your column of light. This is the fields of rotation that are happening in your field, and your emotional wobble and your ability to embody awareness around shifting the gravity of that emotional wobble and correcting it is everything that we really do in the 9 assemblage points. But I think it's one of the most mysterious process in this. I think the code isn't even as mysterious as this sometimes. And even though the 9 assemblage point is very simplified, and here's all the feelings. Now, if you study this anyplace else, they will not give you the dualities because this came through a different conduit. Okay, not everybody connects it that these are scalar waves. Okay, this is what the Spirit showed me a long time ago and said this is the ancient awareness that we knew a long time ago. And even this morning, I saw this these experiments that they did around the subtle vibrational reality, and they color coded the 12 parts of the subtle vibrational reality. Sound familiar, you guys? Okay, the code. All right. Now, have they suppressed this information that this is some real shit and they've actually proved it and they can measure it? Yeah, of course. Of course, of course. Okay. So this is why people are still, I don't know if I believe in the subtle body. And it's like, okay, then you just don't believe that we live in a vibrational reality. And the subtle body is about that. And I thought about that this morning and I said, well, holy shit, what are we becoming? We're becoming experts in the subtle body and how it organizes. Okay. And we're not the first to realize that this is important. In Egypt, they had pendulums and stuff like that that are coded to certain waveforms to measure. And they would use a pendulum. This is where this shit comes from, where we're doing it today, to conjugate that actual form and measure what? Its pulse. Its pulse or its charge. So not much has really changed. And that's what's great about the Toltecs. You're seeing something very similar happening in the assemblage point system of where two fields meet. And what have we been focusing on? We've been focusing on the heart field and the brain field where two fields meet. Okay. And it meets right across here. You can literally take a picture of the infrared and you will see it. It's right here, right across the breast line. Okay. So let's open it up for questions and around focusing and organizing intent. This is what I'm interested in today. And possibly where am I the most disorganized in my intent is my solar plexus and the third code. Okay. Because living from the place of no fucking pity, it's not that easy, is it? It's something you have to constantly stalk, and pity becomes this thing that you recognize as being weaponized outside of you.